Hey guys, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate all the feedback on this video series, this two-part series. Lots of great comments, and we're going to address some of those. But I want some closure on this. And what some of you may not realize is we actually produced this video almost 3 years ago. It was December of 2022 that we filmed part 1. And then I came back for part 2 in January of 2023. And I even mentioned at the beginning, if you caught it, I was like, hey, this is after Christmas now, and it's been a few weeks, and we were trying to remember what we had done. So this video, why are you seeing it now? Well, we pulled it off of the website, and we do that sometimes as we bring new content in, which, by the way, we have a recent series. There's 3 parts up now. On what it takes to call a bad module, and we're talking about power as grounds, 5-volt references, communication signals, so getting into CAN stuff. And again, 3 parts are up now with a continuing plan for that series where I'm actually teaching at the college and we're recording with a live class, and it's a lot of this stuff many of you are familiar with the style that we do. But when we put new content up, sometimes we pull old content off and bring it to you guys. So that's where this came from. And that's where some of my issues came when I reviewed this footage. And I realized there wasn't really good closure at the end of this. Did we fix it? Right? That's the issue. Did we fix this vehicle? And then I couldn't remember, because this is almost 3 years ago, because it's now December of 2025, and December of 2022 was when we first looked at that. And I couldn't remember if we had replaced all the coils as well as the plugs. We showed on video, we changed all of the plugs. And so I called my brother. I was like, hey, did we change all the coils on that too? And fortunately, he had a record of it. I'm actually looking at his invoice right here in front of me on what he actually did. And no, we did not change the coils. We left all the coils alone. And that left me with questions. Well, what about that one coil that we replaced? If you remember, we were catching misfires at times when we packed it with snow, which many of you thought was funny. Some didn't like that at all.
I got a comment on TikTok that was like, you're losing it, Danner.
You're losing it. I got some comments like that too. It was like, what are you doing? Like you're yeah. I get it. I understand. But if you remember, this was a cold engine misfire. We could only make it miss mainly cold. And that's when my brother noticed it too. It was very cold engine, severe misfire. And we were able to duplicate that by packing snow. Not great captures as far as, how many times we tried to see the misfire. And I was able to catch it on the number 2 cylinder, if you remember. I think what we had my brother do, and at the end of part 1, was replace that coil. And I think he did that plug too. Yeah, in part 2, we realized it didn't fix anything. In fact, my brother told me that it was really, really bad in the morning, and he ended up taking the coil back out and never put it back in. So we never replaced that coil. All the coils went back in. And if you guys remember, we had one coil that was different than the rest. It was the number 3 cylinder. So I have some more history with that, because I did talk to the customer. So as we go here, I know I'm Captain Longwind. I'm just trying to connect all the dots, but I spoke to the customer through my brother's invoice. And this is the first time I talked to the customer. And by the way, awesome guy, super appreciative, super understanding of the whole process. And he was really kind in that he was back and forth messaging me, telling me where we are, what happened, a little more of the history. And so I can fill you guys in on that, on did we fix this thing or not? But we'll get to that coming up. But I just want to be clear on how it left. It left with 4 new plugs. Now, my brother also did some other things. If you remember, there were some bulletins, and I remember seeing that there was a bulletin for the exhaust actually freezing up. I don't know if you remember that, Caleb. Like, the exhaust would freeze on this model car from water, from poor weep holes in the muffler or resonator. So the exhaust would freeze, and then you would have low power conditions when it was really cold outside, apparently after the car was sitting, because obviously the exhaust isn't going to freeze when the car is running, so it's not going to be a long drivability problem and all of a sudden the exhaust freezes up. No, it would be after it sits overnight in the cold, and then when you go to drive it, you have no power. And those were concerns too. If you guys remember, we never got this car to a point where, remember, the customer had it towed. We never got it to a point where it ran that bad that I felt like it needed to be towed. So there was always a question in our minds. And if you remember at the end of this, I was like, Danner, we need to keep this thing open because we have some variables here that we might not be seeing. Yes, we proved a faulty spark plug, right? Moved it from the number 3 to the number 4, or I think I swapped coils to prove it, right? We had a misfire on number 3, clear misfire on the waveform, and then I moved the coils and it stayed with the number 3, proving the plugs. What I'm gonna do is we're gonna move some things around now. Yeah, you can see it. And that's the green trace, which is cylinder 3. So we're gonna move that. Let's go move that. We're just gonna do a quick coil swap here. I'll go 3 to 4, and we'll be able to tell real quick here if this is a plug or a coil. But we're still on cylinder 3. This is a bad plug. That's probably your best shot right there. That's still on cylinder 3. But we never got like severe misfire. So there was, that bulletin was there. And one of the things that my brother had done, so we got 4 plugs, no coils were replaced, 4 plugs. And my brother actually warned him about that bulletin. And he did a few things here. He drilled a few very small weep holes in the muffler and resonator to allow normal moisture to escape. And that was per discussion with the customer. Related bulletin shows replacing the main muffler with updated unit with factory weep holes. So my brother just basically made some weep holes in the muffler to account for that variable of, hey, maybe we're not seeing this part, and that is happening to this guy. There was also a bulletin too that required a program update for cold weather performance. So we addressed that as well, that there could be a module program for cold weather performance issues. And then we put at the end, may need ignition coil replacement if problem returns. So when we finished this, the reason we felt like it was okay to bring to you guys, my brother was able to duplicate a very severe misfire on cold starts, which we were not able to. We caught it initially in part 1, and I caught it a little bit in part 2, but not to the level my brother felt. And when he changed that coil, he had a severe misfire the next morning. So he just pulled the coil back out, and then I came back and I'm like, okay, well, we didn't fix it. So when we were done, we felt comfortable giving this car back to this customer. Why? Because we let the car sit overnight, and we had it for multiple starts in the morning, severe misfire, and there was no misfires whatsoever on the next morning. And it was very cold too. It was in January, so it was nice that it was cold weather and we were able to duplicate. There were no misfires, no cold engine misfires once the plugs were replaced. And I know a lot of you are thinking, man, you spent too much time on that. Like, that was a long diagnosis. And I agree with you, it was. But this is one of those things where it's proving it on camera as opposed to working in the field are two separate things. And I spent a lot of time because I wanted to show you guys the waveform capture of a misfire. I could feel it. I was having trouble picking it out for you guys on camera. And if you're in the field, yeah, you're probably putting coils and plugs in that way sooner. But that's a lot of money too. Probably $100 a coil. And spark plugs are $20 a piece. So it's not like chump change. I'm not just going to throw parts at the customer's car, especially given his history. So we want to read this history again. It gives me a little bit more perspective now in hindsight on what we were actually dealing with. So I went back to part 1 and I took notes on what I was reading, that note that the customer left us. Great note, by the way, on what was happening. He did an excellent job. We tend to shudder when we see notes like that, but this customer did an excellent job in this description. But check this out. Listen to these symptoms. And you guys tell me, would you just chuck coils and plugs at it and call it a day? Maybe you would. In this case, it would have been a win, right? It just needed plugs. The plugs fixed this. The plugs, let me say this again. the plugs fixed this problem. I know you have questions. Well, what about that misfire you saw when you packed snow? I know. I don't know is my answer. Like, it was a momentary misfire, and it just, we could catch them sometimes even without snow packed around the coil. So what's the answer there? Spark plug. That waveform absolutely was a shorted type or open type condition that we were seeing. I think that first capture was an open. Would you chuck parts at it for this? Given the history of this, I don't think so. Listen to this. After a bumpy road and highway speeds, he was on a bumpy road. Hot engine. So he's been driving it, right? This isn't cold engine here for this one. He's on the highway. He's been driving it. Hit like some bumpy road construction stuff, and he was on those rumble strips. It started misfiring very badly for him. This is like the first time it happened. And he turned the car off, waited for 10 minutes, and the problem disappeared. Like severe misfire. He had to pull over. Turned the car off, waited 10 minutes, problem disappeared. And it didn't happen again for 90 more miles. He drove it 90 miles all the way back home. That doesn't sound like plugs. That doesn't sound like coils. They don't typically act that way. Something goofy there. So what he did at that point, he replaced the mass airflow and the cylinder 3 coil pack based on the code. So apparently he got back home, replaced the MAF, and replaced that one coil that you guys saw was a different color of NGK writing. So after that, since the incident on the road where he was driving over the rumble strips and had the misfire and then pulled over and all that, since that incident, the vehicle has a slight jerk when coming to a stop. And this is heavy loads towing. This was in the original one. This is significant. You're going to find when I talk to him again here at the end, because there's something here that we didn't address. This is a deceleration, heavy towing. But since the original incident, he's had this jerk when coming to a stop. Now, after he did the coil and the mass airflow sensor, a year later, no issues for a year. But it continued to have that jerk feeling coming to stops. Okay, no misfiring, deceleration, coming to a stop, feeling a jerk. Then he says, this is in the original, severe storm, top of the mountain. After the storm passed, a misfire began. Now, we assumed that was cold, maybe a snowstorm, but we don't know. I'm not sure. I didn't get that info. It's not really important. But after a storm, the misfire began again. This is a year later. And he lost power going up hills on this mountain, and he had it towed. It was bad enough he had it towed. What did he do then? Again, this is the original complaint. He replaced the plugs and oxygen sensor based on codes, I assume, and the issue disappears again. Another year without incident. So now we have a sudden cold snap. It's 10 degrees. Vehicle loaded, 400 pounds of gear. Engine still somewhat cold. This is in his original description. Misfire and losing power. Couldn't pull a hill. Had it towed home. While waiting for a tow, sitting there idling, engine smoothed out. The codes were a P0300 and the 303 code, which is that coil that he replaced. Remember, we saw a misfire on coil 2, but 303, that replacement coil, was the one he replaced. And an O2 code again, but he didn't record the number for that. But ever since, so this third incident, ever since it misfires under any significant load but no check engine light. And that's when we got it. Now it's in our hands. Oil changed. I didn't cover this. Replaced fuel injectors. He replaced all 4 injectors for this problem. New battery, which we appreciated. He had a valve cover gasket. Then he cleaned the mass airflow. He checked for a head gasket, didn't see it. And then the current codes, when we started, ignition coil C, secondary, that's cylinder 3. Mass airflow sensor A, range performance, that was there. U codes, scan tool caused those issues. If you remember, he had a scan tool on it that was doing weird things with the locks and caused some issues. So that was where that was where we were. And so, listen, I'm at the end of this, bringing this video to you guys, and I'm like, did we actually fix this car? How do we know we fixed it? The only thing we had to go by was we replaced the plugs. Not the only thing. I proved a faulty plug on the scope. I caught it. 100%. Felt very, very confident we were fixing a problem. Were we fixing all the problems is the question, right? For those of you that said I spent too much time on this, no. I proved that plug. That was key. That was key in this diagnosis, this plug issue. So, and that was, if I remember, that was on cylinder 3. That was on cylinder 3, so that matches his ignition coil C secondary circuit fault. But other than cold start, everything's good, warning the customer, drilling the holes, bulletins and all that, I was like, I need to talk to this customer, especially bringing this to you guys, because I know I had the questions, and I had one of you say that. You're like, hey, will you give us a follow-up? And I'm like, absolutely. I'm talking to the customer right now. So let's go through the message from the customer. This is pretty amazing that he would do this for me. I'll just say his first name. Denny, you're an amazing customer. I wish all customers were like you. Unbelievable in how much you communicated with me on this final part for everyone to get closure for all of us. And so I'm like, hey, this is Paul. I know it's been, almost 3 years. Can you give me some info? And he got back to me right away. And he says, to start with, hey, Paul, just watched the video. It was great to see all the time and frustration involved, especially the snow experiment. I think the initial 2020 incident, this is key, listen to this, and I didn't know this. I think the initial 2020 incident damaged the torque converter. The jerk it acquired after never went away. That means after we did the plugs, his deceleration jerk feeling never went away after that initial after that initial incident that he pulled over, shut the key off, waited, right? I think he's right on this. It was a torque converter issue because, listen, it started slipping badly during a cold snap last winter. So this would be, last winter be 2024. So this would be a year later after our repair. His transmission was slipping badly, and it would always be single digit weather when it would do it. So he says, I knew I was on borrowed time before total failure, so I traded it in for a 4Runner in the spring. So he doesn't even have the car anymore. He traded it in for a 4Runner, which was actually a really good idea, I think, for what he does. Much more appropriate vehicle for all the heavy gear I haul around. I was admittedly rough on that tranny over the years. He says, I did convince the guy at Rorick, which is a dealership, to do the software update. And that was, if you remember, cold weather performance. But he said by the time that he did that, it was almost March and the weather had warmed up and the misfire was already gone. So he wasn't having any issues, but he did get the dealership to do that TSB bulletin and do that cold weather update. But he never had a chance to really see after that because he, got rid of the car, maybe not long after. So he said, I have no idea if that did anything because we never got to cold weather again. And he says, yeah, I'm glad you got good content out of it. I told your brother how much I appreciated all the time he spent on the phone with me. He definitely went above and beyond considering what he charged. Looking forward to part 2. So my brother's the man with that stuff. Very fair with his customers. And I told Denny, the owner, I said, watch part 2. I just put it out today. I have a few more questions, and I wanted him to watch it. This is the first time he's seen it, too. I said, you mentioned torque converter issue. I was not aware of that. But the cold engine severe misfire that my brother felt, how was that part when we were done? I said, from memory, you had it towed to him, so it must have been pretty bad. He says this, yeah. August of 2020, I ran over an extremely bumpy stretch of I-79. That's what we're talking about, the original, which was under construction, going about 60 miles an hour, with 500 pounds of equipment in the back. After several bumps, it started misfiring so violently the whole car was shaking, same as when I had it towed to you, but there was no shoulder due to construction, so I rode it out like that for a half a mile. That's on those rumble strips, right? And so to the next exit, pulled over, turned it off, turned it back on 10 minutes later, and it was like nothing happened. Drove for another 90 miles over the mountains to Altoona without incident. That's a very mountainous area for us. But in the weeks following that incident, I noticed it developed a lurch when decelerating. The severe misfiring, though, pay attention, guys, is important. The severe misfiring, though, that never came back. Did we fix it? Yes, we did. Made it through winter of 2023 and 24. Remember, this was 23 in January when we finished, so we made it through the winter without issues. Although, if I remember, it was a milder winter temperature-wise. Strange thing was, listen, those plugs were OEM and just a little over a year old. Remember, he changed the plugs. He says he changed them. They were OEM plugs. But replacing them with the NGK ones did the trick. That's the ones we put in were NGK. And many of you guys were like, OEM only, OEM only. I'm with you guys. I'm 100% an OEM only plug person. I assumed the NGKs were factory for that. Apparently not. The ones that came out said Mazda on them. And this is confirming from the customer. Those were OEM plugs just over a year old. And then he says, I kept the same coil packs, including the non-Mazda NGK one from Rock Auto. The other three that were labeled both Mazda and NGK were original from the dealership when I bought it used in 2017. So those coils had been on there since 2017, except for that one from Rock Auto, which had nothing to do with our issues here, guys. And the reason I replaced the plugs the first time was due to the same thing, severe misfiring incident going up mountains in a thunderstorm, leading to total loss of power. In total, that happened 4 times over 3 years, but never happened again after you guys gave it back to me. Now, we have a variable there. He didn't have the car for a whole lot longer after that, maybe. And then I said, sorry, last question. The jerk you described with the converter was during clutch lockup, I'm assuming. Misfiring can be pronounced the most during that time. You have converter clutch lockup. That's when you'll feel misfires. But you never set any other misfire codes or anything like that. That's a question. Cold engine starts were good and wide open throttle, heavy foot driving were also good. Those were questions. And he says yes to both. No misfires, wide open throttle, cold engine, all good. He said, my knowledge of transmissions is limited, but it seems to me the jerk was when the clutch was disengaging, decelerating. It would happen when slowing to a stop. It would be really pronounced when the car was cold and coasting downhill to a stop. Never on acceleration, only deceleration. It did that for almost 5 years before it started slipping. Cold start, first accel, would occasionally slip out of drive, RPMs to the moon. I'd put it in reverse back to drive and it would be fine once warmed up. But that's when I knew the end was near, and that's when he got rid of the car. So, what do you guys think? Pretty good case study. Scope was key. Proving that fault with a misfire when the plugs was key. I'm still left with questions. I know you will be too. We'll never have an answer. But, why are we going through plugs on this once a year? Right? Seems to be the pattern. He didn't change the plugs each time, but the plugs were changed a year prior, and then a year later we develop a misfire. But I remember reading from you guys in the comments that there were some plug issues on this motor, and there were updated plugs for that reason. Whether that was Mazda or NGK, I'm not totally sure, but we fixed it. Did it need coils? No. It was a plug issue. Proving the fault on camera was what we did here. So hopefully that gives you guys some closure. We didn't have that information before. All we were going by is we didn't hear back from the customer and our cold engine miss was gone. So yeah, we did feel comfortable bringing this to our community. We felt we fixed it. The snow packed coils was pretty cool. We had, used that in the past on a fuel injector. My son can throw a clip in here of that fuel injector issue, that it would be an issue hot and ran fine cold, and so we cooled the fuel injector back off using snow. So I've done this before with snow, never on ignition coils, but that was pretty fun doing that. We're just grateful for each of you to be here with us, and we appreciate all of the comments. We value all of you. We learn from you as much as you learn from us, and And we appreciate your patience in watching us navigate through this. Remember, we film live. Everything we do is live. We don't go through processes and then, edit it down and turn the cameras on and make ourselves look like heroes. Look, here's the problem. No, we film live from start to finish. So that's what we do here. If you didn't know that yet, now you do. Well, thank you for joining us. Hope you guys like this one. We will see you next time.
So I'm sitting here. I'm not going to make Caleb get the camera out again, but I'm like, I feel like we're missing something on this car. First time he changed one coil and mass airflow sensor, and it didn't happen for a year after that. And then the second time he replaced the plugs, and it didn't happen for a year after that. And we replaced the plugs, and all was fine, but he didn't own it for long enough to know it made it through the rest of the winter. So is there an underlying problem here? Should it have gotten all the coils too? Very possible. Some of you mentioned gas direct injection systems and carbon on the valves, and of course those are valid repairs as well. I'm uncomfortable with that, as well as many of you will be. I just know for sure that we're comfortable seeing that secondary ignition fault on the scope. And how important was that right now in my mind with everything that we're doing? It wasn't just symptoms that they went away, because we have history of these symptoms going away. We were able to prove that fault. I was really, really happy to have that. Secondary ignition misfires like that, they're tricky sometimes, but that was clutch for us. Yeah, just curious to hear your thoughts. The car's gone, so we'll never know. Again, thanks guys for joining us. Just wanted to add this last piece.